It's such a pleasure to have you, ma'am, with us.
Thank you, Sachin.
And I think this meeting was very long due. And the topic that we will be talking is very, very interesting, which is all about love. So, from your perspective and from history, heritage standpoint, what do you think of love? How do you define love?
I think it's one of the most difficult things to define because it's structured and it's also unstructured. Within history also you would find so many different kinds of love. So there is beginning from the love for God to love for a beloved to parental love and siblings, friends, and the story goes on. It's a very complex area to get into. And then there's also this debate whether love is just all about emotions or is it also about physicality? Is it about physical beauty or just something that you feel? So one of the hardest things to talk about, because there are so many colors and within the colors there would be so many shades, so it's hard to really put your finger on what really love is, although its universality is amazing, its stability is amazing, because once you fall in love it's very difficult to come out of it.
Oh, absolutely. The more you fall in love, the better you become.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
But having said that, I mean, love from past and love of today. How do you compare both of them from the emotive perspective, you know?
I think there's a very interesting strain from, about love from past, where you find that you fall in love just by chance. It's not something that was planned, it just happens. So maybe when you think of Abhijan Shakuntalam of Kalidas, you find that Shakuntala just, Dushyant just happens to reach there and he sees her and they fall in love. And then the parting and the re-meeting again. So it's all it's very much by chance kind of a thing. Or if you look at Malvika Agnimitra, the play from ancient India, again you have the same kind of strain, that Agnimitra happens to see Malvika dancing and he falls in love with her. And then of course the cinematic versions of love have captured this so many times. Also parental love, when you think in the historical sense, you find that you have the narrative about Puru, and you have the narrative about Nachiket, who went looking for death because his father had, kind of gifted him to death. So he thought that I have to fulfill my father's word. So that's about, a child's love for his parents. Or maybe when you have Shravan Kumar who's carrying his parents. So there are so many varied strains. And in this context, Sachin, I would like to point out here that the romantic side of love has hogged so much of limelight, whether it's the past or it's the present, that there are so many other different strains which are just hidden in the background and not spoken about.
Absolutely.
So maybe one needs to explore them too.
This gives me a cue to understand from the masculine standpoint. I mean, why the masculine side of love is difficult to understand?
I think men are trained to be less vocal about showing love, and that is something that the younger generation is perhaps trying to do much better than the earlier ones, because now they are unlearning these stereotypes, So I think that saying I love you is it used to be a very difficult thing once upon a time.
Oh, absolutely.
But it's becoming easier now, and a lot of time when people have to say that they love somebody, they know that they're going to be, they look vulnerable, they're going to look weak. It puts them in a difficult, and I would say in a weaker position when you're telling somebody that you love them. So you find people saying, or also writing sometimes, they would just write love, and they would write love love you, but they won't come to saying I love you, because the moment you put I, it becomes so much more heavier. You're putting yourself right there, and then if you say that I love you lots, I love you more than you love me, it all becomes amplified and goes on getting more and more intense. And sometimes people are scared of getting into that space, because that space requires commitment. And so much of the younger generation is not ready to commit, because you have so many other distractions, so many other attractions, so many possibilities.
No, because this gives me goosebumps, because when I think about my days, way back in 90s, it used to be numeric code, and I can just open up right now. It used to be 831. So it used to be 8 letter, 3 words, 1 meaning. That is I love you.
Lovely.
So instead of roll numbers, we used to exchange this numeric coding out there.
That's lovely.
Yeah, I mean, and having you with us and getting to know this topic, love, happiness, while we are in Shah Jahanabad right now, the old Delhi, how can you relate this to the past of Mughal times, and the effects of Chandni Raat Mein Chandni Chowk, that sort of a notion with love? What will be your thought line to that?
Well, being in Shah Jahanabad right now, it reminds me, of course, of Shah Jahan's love for, Mumtaz Mahal Begum. And the classic thing about Shah Jahan is that he had just 3 marriages. So 2 of them are arranged political marriages. It's only this one which is about love. And Mumtaz Mahal is the only queen who bears any children to him. So it's a very interesting kind of a setup. But the other thing is that we have other love stories also from the Mughal times which are understated. So in the Mughal period, in Akbar's period, although we don't have any such grand love story of Akbar, but generally speaking, when you read the Muntakhabut Tawarikh of Abdul Qadir Badayuni, he mentions 2 love stories. In one of them, there is the wife of a sunar, who's of a jeweler, who's in love with a Muslim man, and this woman is a non-Muslim. So they just fall in love because there's a very romantic setting that Badayuni talks about. So she had bathed and she had this long wet hair and she was drying, and this fellow was in the gully and he happens to see her, and they fell in love. And मतलब जिसको हम लोग कहते हैं ना कि वो आंखों आंखों में सब उनकी जो है वो setting हो गई, and they decided to elope. And she eloped with him with a long ghungat, and they were on their way, and they were trying to look for the Badshah. They wanted to reach Akbar because they thought that if they reach him, then perhaps he's going to help them out in this situation. But there was somebody who recognized this wife of the jeweler by her anklets. उसकी पायल या तो बहुत भारी होंगी या किसी खास तरह की बनी हुई होंगी, उसने पहचान लिया. And she was sent back home. Thereafter, she had to go back home, and she told her in-laws that she doesn't know where she had gone because there's perhaps some kind of an evil influence which took her somewhere, wherever. But these guys, they kept trying to meet each other, and they tried to elope once again, but nothing worked out for them. And eventually, it was a tragedy. So in Akbar's period, we have at least 3 major narratives. There's another narrative where you have a Muslim, Orthodox Muslim family, again from Akbar's period. And this man was inclined to, to have a deep affection for a woman who was a dancer, singer, something like a tawayaf. And his family got to know. So Sheikh Saab's family went to Akbar and they said that you please get this woman married off to somebody else, because otherwise our son is going to say that he wants to marry her. So she was married off to somebody, and this woman, she left her husband and she ran away from there. So this matter was also brought to Akbar's notice. And Akbar said that you guys never told me that the girl also loves this fellow. Because if you would have told me that, then I wouldn't have married her off to anybody. I only thought that the boy loves her. I didn't know that the girl also loves. Now bring both of them. So both of them were brought. And they were brought to the court. Akbar asked this girl that you love him and you want to marry him. She said, yeah. So he said that this marriage is sanctioned. So अब ये जो शेख साहब की family थी, they said कि we will not accept her. And Sheikh Saab was so sad about this that he committed suicide. He died. Then another case came to Akbar's court कि अब क्योंकि इसने suicide करी है, तो इस्लाम के हिसाब से इसकी जनाजे की नमाज नहीं होगी because suicide is not allowed. So Akbar ruled in this particular case that because he's died in love, so he's a shaheed. तो जनाजे की नमाज तो होगी.
Okay.
So janaze ki namaz happened, and then this woman left her family, and she used to just hang around the grave of this man and keep the place clean. And this author of ours, Abdul Qadir, who's writing in the 16th century, he goes on to say that her parents also left her after this. I mean, nobody was bothered about what she was doing. And the same was the case with the Sunarizmi also. Sunarizmi was also kind of just left alone. And he goes on to write that किसी लुटे हुए खेत से जमींदार भी लगान नहीं लेता है. So the family thought कि ये तो लुट के बर्बाद हो ही गए हैं. तो अब जो familial rights थे कि तुम्हें ये करना चाहिए, इससे शादी करो, उससे मत करो,
उसका कोई मतलब नहीं.
कोई मतलब नहीं. They already finished. So although we know of Shah Jahan's love for Mumtaz, but there are so many other angles, because Akbar may not have his own personal love story, but he patronizes love as an idea.
Yeah. And this brings me to a question, because this is a very interesting topic. बाग और बगीचों में के साथ प्यार, अपने शहर के साथ प्यार,
बिल्कुल,
अपने कल्चर के साथ प्यार,
बिल्कुल।
इस कॉन्टेक्स्ट को कैसे देखा जा रहा है हिस्ट्री और हेरिटेज में?
I think ये जो पूरा idea है, it has so many times been used by people who are in politics, rulers,
Okay.
administrators,
Yeah.
because you know they would always amplify that you belong to this place, or maybe this is your ethnic line. When you think of Babur when he came to Hindustan, he always said that I'm a Turk. He never said that I'm half a Mongol too. And of course, he was distant in the line of Mongols, but there were a lot of Mongols who came with him for the first battle of Panipat.
Yeah.
But he never gives them any credit, because what worked for him at that point in time was saying that he was from the Timurid line.
Okay.
So, you know, that is something that he would use. Or maybe, you know, you would have so many instances where people will talk about their local deities.
Yeah.
Tribes will have their own local gods, respect, honor for them, people ready to die for them. So, love in that sense has often been used and misused.
Yes.
You see,
Yes.
also, and it's still being misused,
Yeah.
because sometimes maybe parents, they make use of a child's love for them.
Yeah.
You know, for trying to control the child even when he's grown and he can make, or she can make her own decisions.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And this now relays again, ma'am, you teach so many students of different age groups. You have so many cohorts, you have got so much of talks and papers that are being written. How do you see Gen Z, you know, from millennial standpoint to Gen Z to Alpha? How do you think they are understanding love? Is it more digital? Is it more emoji centric? Or is it, it has a nuance from past also?
I feel that it does has a nuance from the past,
Yeah.
because there are some things which are so dramatized in history, and you really can't get rid of those images. So whoever, I mean, whichever generation it is, I think Taj Mahal continues to be an icon of love for everyone, year after year. You know, it's been there,
Yeah.
and it's always been appreciated for that. So having said that, but you find, you know, the younger generation has its own way of emoting and its own way of putting your, you know, your feelings out there. Also, the kind of space that they expect for themselves in a relationship of love is quite different.
Yeah.
So maybe some of them would feel that beyond a point, they really don't want to hang around with their parents anymore, because they think that, you know, it'll be nicer if they have their own space. And I think they feel that the relationship with their parents will be more secure if there is a distance which is maintained. While in the ancient past, the togetherness of families was celebrated. And let me emphasize this also at this point, Sachinji, ki there are some relationships of love which are pre-structured as per the genes that we have. So we share more than maybe 50% genes with our parents, almost 50% with our siblings, 25% with our nieces and nephews. So that is a very organized, structured, natural bonds of love which just exist. And as a species, we are programmed to save our type of genes. We are just programmed. So first we'll save our genes, then we'll also save our type of species. So like you'd find that in a society, one would say कि भाई ये जो मोहल्ले वाले हैं उनको अंकल हैं, दुकान वाले भी जो अंकल हैं, चौकीदार भैया हैं, you know, and you attach those kind of prefixes and suffixes to people. So that extending the idea of familial and familiarity, familial love, bonds of affection, that's all about the species trying to save itself.
But in the familiar surrounding, or in the familiar way of understanding, there's a very thin line now which overlaps between liking and loving.
Yes.
Yeah, and
Yes.
And I think that's the confusion driven area where coaching is required or understanding is required, you know. But looking at our nation, looking at our past, ancient, medieval, modern, what will be one example from your perspective which can give or sustain the thought that love yahi hai, love aisa hi tha, ya love aisa hi rahega?
There are actually so many things.
Just
that come to
one
my
example,
mind.
because I would like the viewers to come down and attend your Guftugu session where they can ask you questions in person.
I think that Laila Majnu is a big classic because it stood the test of time, and it's traveled from Arabia to almost all parts of the world, and it's become, like a metaphor. It's used like a muhavra so many times. So, but that's a type. And in the type there is, of course, that Majnu's name was Qais. And Majnu itself means someone who's mad. So there are so many of the Greek philosophers who say that if it is not madness, it is not love. There has to be a degree of madness where you let yourself go. Because if you're in a space where you control, then it's not really love, because then you're calculating. And love is a heady mixture of emotion, impulse, enthusiasm, things that you don't explain from where they come.
But how about ignorance? I mean, I see madness as ignorance sometimes, where you want to indulge in, and then you ignore your duties or your dependencies or your ways of living.
True. Then we would immediately in fact come to the idea that whatever kind of a emotion you're dealing with, it has to be in a balance. Because the moment you lose the balance, you're just tilting into, literally falling in such a deep pit of love that you can't see anything outside what's happening.
So now again, coming back to history as a lover of history, now from Delhi city standpoint, what do you think, who has fallen in love more than any of the people and personalities who have been living here?
In Delhi
per se.
Sachin, that's such a difficult question, because I wasn't prepared.
So that we park for Guftugu then,
because in the Delhi context per se, in Delhi itself,
in Delhi
itself.
Because Valentine's Day, the 14th February is somewhere now many people celebrate. They celebrate as a hint of togetherness or an excuse to be together. And there are many businesses, many flower shops, many bakeries. There's a lot of indulgence all over.
Okay, but then actually
so I'm hinting towards indulgence.
I'll just come to this, because your question has made me think, and there's one kind of a love which comes to my mind, and it's very unique, because Mubarak Shah Khilji, who was the son of Alauddin Khilji, who just happened to come to the throne, he fell in love with a man whose name was Hassan, and Mubarak Shah Khilji was perhaps inclined towards being gay. And Hassan was not. So this guy is madly in love with Hassan Barawar, and Hassan Barawar, there's a very graphic description of their relationship in the Tarikh-e-Firoz Shahi of Ziauddin Barni, very well translated by Professor Ishtiyaq Zilli. So it goes on to write that every time that Mubarak Shah would kiss Hassan Barawar, Hassan thought that if he had a knife, he would cut off his lips, and eventually Hassan does take revenge. So I think that is, and there were people who were warning Mubarak Shah Khilji that Hassan Barawar is really not your lover. Just be aware of him. He's going to do something to you, and that is exactly what happens. So Hassan Barawar eventually kills Mubarak Shah Khilji.
Interesting, and this relays me to a rumor which you can choose to answer or explain, because there are many stories in Mehroli Archaeological Park about Jamali Kamali, and not many people understand Jamali or Kamali, and there are many abbreviations, many sayings. What is the real truth?
Very hard to say. Very hard to say. But in the same kind of a scenario, there's a narrative which comes from Abdul Qadir. He says that he's a married man with children, and there was perhaps another man that he was attracted to, and he fixed a meeting. Both of them were supposed to meet in a graveyard. So because the graveyards, are generally isolated. So he writes that the family of this guy, they got to know about the meeting. So instead of him, the family came and they really beat up Abdul Qadir very badly. So he says that perhaps I chose the wrong place because graveyard was not the right place for a meeting like this. And then I think of the poor Lodi Gardens, because the Lodi Gardens are, like brimming with lovers.
Bagh-e-Jud, it used to be known as,
Yeah.
And taking a clue again from your talk, love afterlife and love with jinns. The social history of Delhi is surrounded by jinns.
Yeah.
So the Jinn Tales is one sort of a walking tour that one of our brand does it. But beside that, I see familiarity, closeness, piousness, sanctity, sacredness with jinns. If you can just give some perspective on that too.
We have a fantastic love story, which is that of Gul Bakauli. So Gul Bakauli is, Bakauli is the name of the princess, and Gul means Bakauli's rose. So the story goes like this, that once there was a king who went blind, and the only cure was that somebody had to bring the rose of Princess Bakauli, and only then he could be cured. So one of his sons set out for this, and he went to Bakauli's palace. Now, Bakauli is actually not from this world. She's a jinn's daughter. And she's asleep. So he plucks the rose and he walks very quietly and he exchanges the rings while Bakauli is still asleep. And he leaves. When Bakauli gets up, she finds that her ring has changed, So she's got somebody else's ring. And then she sets out to look for this man. And she finds him and she marries him. And Bakauli, and he never knows that this girl is a jinn. She's not a human. And Bakauli was a dancer in the court of Sri Indra. And this other two characters are Muslims. The jinn is also Muslim. This boy was also Muslim. And then you have the backdrop of Sri Indra's court. So she used to dance in the Sabha of Sri Indra. And then there were these guys who were sent from the court of Sri Indra, and they asked Bakauli that you have not come for the dances for so long, and Sri Indra is asking for you. And she says, okay, fine, I don't tell my husband, I'm coming. And in the night, while this guy was asleep, there was a Udan Khatola. So she sat on it and she was taken to the court and she danced there. So when the moment she entered, Indra knew that this woman is smelling of human beings. So she couldn't enter like that. She couldn't dance before him with this human smell coming from her. So she had to be burnt. So she was burnt entirely and she was then restructured from the ashes without the human smell. And she was a jinn, pure jinn again. And then she danced. And eventually her husband realized that she goes missing every night. So he followed her. And he also reached there. And he saw that she is being burnt to purified. And then one day the man who used to play some of the musical instruments, he didn't come. So this guy said that I'm going to play. So he played and Sri Indra was very pleased. And he asked this fellow, what do you want? And he says that I want Bakauli.
This is so interesting. I think one of our Guftugu session will be around this, the jinn love stories, which is a very interesting topic. Now, having said that, though we are in last segment of our talk, having said that about love and understood from various perspectives, being in love, being loved, or to love, there's a role of perfumes, Itra. How do you sense that from historic standpoint?
I think it'll be nice if we have all the fragrances of of this Itra. So that is that. But there are so many things that add to the feeling. There are so many other things. That is why the element of physicality comes. And when you think about and therein comes the idea of the ishke hakiki and the ishke majazi, the true love, which is the soul's eventual and ultimate quest for for being accepted by the maker. So that's that. But let me just quickly tell you here that there is this hikayat which comes from Moinuddin Chishti in a book called the Dalilul Arifin. It's a book compilation of his Malfuzat. So he talks about a category which is the Ishke Ilahi, love for God. And he says that if you really are gunning for Ishke Ilahi, then you have to give the triple talaq. So you have to say, it's actually written like that you have to say talaq, talaq, talaq to yourself.
Wow.
So first you have to divorce yourself, and only then you can gun for something like that. And divorce in the Islamic context is a very serious business, because once the triple talaq is done, it's very difficult to get married to that person. You can marry 100 times, but it's very difficult to get married to the same person again. Yeah. So there's almost a finality about the triple talaq.
Yeah.
So the ishq-e-ilahi is a thing, the idea of hub, which is muhabbat. So I think, and of course then, Sachin, we didn't speak about loving yourself.
Well, I think that's the topic I'm keeping for Guftagu, because that is a more in-person topic, where I would like audience to spend time with you and understand that, But yes, I mean, it will be great to have some bits from you right now on this.
I mean, I was just thinking, see, loving yourself is one thing that we need to look into. Also, since you were talking about the youngest of the lot that we have, they are so preoccupied with their mobile phones and all the knowledge and, gyan which is floating all over the place. The world has so much more to offer to them. There's no room for just being with yourself and sorting your thoughts out. So sometimes they don't know who they are and whom do they really love. So there's a confusion there, right? So understanding your own feelings is again something, and also understanding whether you are being loved by the other person, or you're just being liked, perhaps you're just being disliked. So all those categories, and to handle those reactions. So I think all those are areas that we need to deal with, because you see, if you say that love is one side of the coin, then perhaps hatred is another side of the coin. Is acceptance and being loved is one side, then rejection is another side. So how hard do you take that rejection?
And this is where education plays a role. This is where awareness comes in.
Yes.
And this is where sensibilities come in, where decision making comes in.
Yes.
And you tend to fail fast, move on, and love again.
Absolutely.
So I thank you very much, ma'am, for being with us. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you for having me over. I'm grateful.